All right, guys. So we are on to the next section in your packets. We are doing the square and cube roots notes and practice. This is going to look a little different. I'm going to do the notes section, and then you'll just pause the video and go through the practice section, and then unpause the video, and you'll just go to the cube roots notes section. So here, just get right into it. We already know that the check mark with the roof, that's called a square root symbol or a radical. So you'll hear me refer to it as the radical a lot in this lesson especially. So it says here, radical 36 is equal to radical of 6 times 6, which we can see how we got that, right? Because 36 equals 6 times 6, okay? So in other words, 6 times 6, we know anytime you multiply something by itself, it's that number squared. So we have, that's the same thing as radical of 6 squared. And then we have, we actually talked about this before spring break, but we have a square root symbol, right, that guy, and a squared symbol. And those are inverse operations. They cancel each other out, okay? So with those canceling each other out, the only thing that's left is the 6. And that's why it equals 6. So that's called the principal square root. But is there another number that when multiplied by itself will also equal 36? Now we kind of alluded to this a little bit before spring break, but that's been a while. So if you don't remember, it is yes. And that is negative 6 times negative 6. Right? Because a negative times a negative is also a positive. And negative 6 times negative 6 would equal a positive 36. There's two answers there. And the way that we show those two answers, this new sign that they're referring to is the plus minus sign there. Okay? That accounts for both the positive and the negative answer for every square root. Typically, they're only going to ask for the principal square root. Okay? But if they don't specify, you've got to include both answers because there are really two answers. Okay? The next question there says, what about the square root of negative 36? Well, you can't have a number multiplied by itself to equal a negative. So for this one, we're just going to go ahead and put not possible, right? A number multiplied by itself can't be negative because if it's negative, a negative times a negative is a positive. If it's positive, a positive times a positive is a positive. So there's no way to get that to equal a negative amount. Now, if the negative sign is out in front, like in this next one, we see the negative sign in front of the radical symbol. It's just like order of operations. Do radical 36, do the square root of 36 first, and then do the negative in front of it. So I've got the square root of 36 equals 6, but then I take that negative sign and I put it in front. So my answer is negative 6. So it says here, knowing what a radical is asking you to find, work backwards. So what if I have the answer? I know the square root of some number is equal to 3. Well, what are they saying there? Remember, if I go back to the notes, what they're really saying is, whatever that answer is at the end, that's supposed to be multiplied by itself under the radical symbol. So really, this is saying the square root of 3 squared, right? Because the square root symbol and the squared symbol cancel each other out. That's how we got an answer of 3. So really, I just work backwards. I square the number, right? 3 times itself, or 3 squared, is equal to 9. So x is equal to 9. All right. What is the value of x? That's what we just said. Is there more than one answer? Working backwards, there's not. There's not more than one answer. All right. 3 times itself is only ever going to equal 9. It can't equal anything else. And then finally, what about when two radicals are being multiplied together? So again, this answer, remember, is supposed to be what's under the radical squared. Okay. So they already split it apart for us. we know squared means to multiply by itself. Really all I'm doing is putting that number in. Okay, square root of 16, work that out. You can see if you work backwards. I have to find what number multiplied by itself, right? That's what this is saying. What number multiplied by itself equals 16? Well, let me erase all that. If I'm trying to find out what number multiplied by itself equals 16, the answer is 4. But I can't put 4 in here, right? Because the square root of 4 is only 2. And 2 times 2 does not equal 16. I've got to get it so that when I take the square root of it, the answer is 4. And that is where that 16 that I initially put in comes into play, right? The square root of 16, work that out. The square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 16 is 4. And bring down your multiplication sign. Yeah, 4 times 4 does equal 16. So when I put in those 16s there, that's my answer. All right, so what you're going to do, it's time to pause the video, is just go ahead and try to work through these, do the best that you can, and then you can check your answer off on the answer key PDF. All right, so you should have finished that, checked off your answers. If you have any questions, make sure you ask your teacher. But now we're going on to cube root, so I'm going to do the notes section for this one. It says here the cube root, and we found this out again before spring break, but I know a lot of stuff happened over spring break. You guys probably don't remember. But I've got this cube, oops, I'm still in the eraser. I've got this cube root symbol. It's called the cube root, and it looks different from the square root in the sense that it has that 3 up there above the check mark, right? So it looks exactly like a square root symbol, except it has the 3 there. So that's how you know they're asking for a cube root. Well, if a square root gave us a number multiplied by itself, right? That's how we found the answer for those. A cube root is saying what number when used 3 times when you're multiplying gives us that answer, right? So that's what you're trying to find here. Because you're using the number 3 times now, the answer to this question is -3, a cube root of 27. The answer for that's going to be no, because if I work that out, -3 times -3 times -3, -3 times -3 is +9, and then I multiply that by that last -3, that equals -27, okay? So that's not what they gave us. They gave us +27. Cube roots don't have 2 answers. There's no new sign here. There's no plus minus sign for any of these, okay? But that also brings up the fact that, you know, can I have a negative number under the cube root symbol? Well, yeah, you can. We just proved that. If the answer is -3, so that just gave us the answer for this one. What about the cube root of -27? Well, that's -3. And we just showed that, because -3 times -3 times -3 does equal -27. I can have a negative underneath the cube root symbol. I just can't have it underneath the square root symbol. What about the negative of the cube root of 27? Well, again, same thing. Follow those order of operations. Do the cube root first. Well, we already know the cube root of 27 is 3, and then bring down that negative sign. So our answer is -3, okay? So then again, it says here, knowing what a cube root is asking you to find, work backwards. So if they're saying that the cube root of some number is equal to 4, I have to work backwards. Well, again, remember that's meaning that I've got the cube root of that number being used 3 times for a multiplication underneath the cube root symbol, right? And just work that out, okay? 4 times 4 is 16, and then bring down that other times 4 at the end. 16 times 4 is 64. So x equals 64. In other words, the cubed root of 64 is 4, because when I use 4 3 times with multiplication, that's what it equals, is 64. Is there more than, I already answered that part, x equals 64. Is there more than one answer? No. Okay, there's only more than one answer. Actually, no, yeah, even with square roots, remember there was only one answer because 3 times itself was only going to ever equal 9. And then finally, what about when two radicals are being multiplied together? So I think what they meant to say here is, what about when I have 3 cube roots being multiplied together, not just 2 radicals. There's 3 of them there. So a little typo, but we get what they're asking us. How do I get that answer to equal 64? Again, guys, just put in that. If I'm working backwards, I know to get 64, it has to be 4 times 4 times 4. So what can I take the cube root of to get an answer of 4? Well, we just found that out. It's 64, so I have to put a 64 in each of those. And again, I can check my answer to make sure that I'm doing that right. If I find out the cube root of 64 is 4, the cube root of 64 is 4, and the cube root of 64 is 4, yeah, 4 times 4 times 4 does equal 64. Give myself a little check mark there. That answer of putting the 64 underneath all of those cube root symbols is correct. Okay, so you're going to do the same thing with cube roots on these ones. Okay, try to find out which one of these they equal. Now, your teacher will show you how to do this on your calculator to make it a little bit easier for you. Okay, but that's what we're trying to do here, is just figure out what number when I use it 3 times now, right? So for square roots, what number multiplied by itself? So I'm just using it multiplying, using the number twice. But for cube roots, it's 3 times, right? So I'm thinking what times what times what is going to be equal to 343 for that first one. So go ahead and check those, or do those, and then check your answer with the answer key. And make sure you ask your teacher if you have any questions.